Liverpool has some very fine buildings. Sadly though, they're not always in the best condition. Many are though, and we have some very fine examples of most styles of architecture. But like everything that we do, architecture has its fashions. Sometimes these fashions have names, and they can be named after the reign of kings, the reign of queens. Sometimes they just try and describe the actual style of the architecture itself. So I'm going to make a short series of videos about the various styles of architecture, and we're going to start off with the Georgian period. So we're going to set off to Liverpool's Georgian Quarter and have a look at Falkner Terrace, Falkner Square and Falkner Street. This is Upper Parliament Street, and it is the most southerly end of Liverpool's Georgian Quarter. This area has seen its ups and downs over the years. In the 1960s and 1970s, it was rarely run down, and of course it's right on the edge of Toxteth, and this is the area where there were riots in the 1980s, so some of the buildings were damaged. These days though, it's a really nice place to be. So this is Falkner Terrace, and we're also going to look at Falkner Square and Falkner Street. So obviously these are named after somebody called Falkner, and he was Edward Falkner. He was a sheriff of Liverpool. Now Liverpool's Georgian Quarter begins in 1800, and it was set aside by a surveyor called John Foster, and he laid out the area that these houses would be built on. They were actually built on a peat bog which was known as Moss Lake Fields. So although these houses were built for Liverpool's rich merchants, and it would have been considered on the edge of the countryside back in those days, they had problems in selling them because firstly people realised that they were built on a bog and they thought they might suffer from subsidence where the building would sink into the ground. So Falkner had to drain the peat bog and redirect a stream to actually attract people to buy one of his houses. They actually became known as Falkner's Folly. The other reason that these merchants were reluctant to buy one of his houses was because from where they were on Liverpool's docks and Liverpool city centre, this would have been an uphill journey for their horses, pulling their carriages and carts. But eventually they did start to sell, and they became very popular with Liverpool's rich. Now Falkner Square was completed in 1830, and the park which we've just walked through was completed in 1835. So as I said earlier, the Georgian period ended in 1830, but was extended by William IV's reign to 1837. So these would be considered as very late Georgian. If we look at Georgian design as a whole in terms of property, You can find these types of buildings all over the country. They take their influence from ancient Greek and Roman designs, and they have a complementary proportion and symmetrical design. Usually they're at least 3 stories high, and the ones in Liverpool here also have a basement. Now if we look at the famous properties in Bath, which is called the Royal Crescent, they were built between 1767 and 1774. In London, Georgian architecture dominates London's most iconic buildings. In fact, probably the most famous one is number 10 Downing Street. Downing Street is a Georgian property, and it was built in the 1680s. Around here you can still find cobble streets and also gas lamps which have been converted to electricity. Also you get glimpses of Liverpool Cathedral as it towers above the houses. These days the area often gets used as a film set because it resembles London's Georgian properties, and it's very difficult, I'm told, for film companies to get permits to close down London streets to film. It's far easier to come to Liverpool. You know, everything we do as humans is dictated by fashion. You know, I remember walking around in 32-inch flared trousers, loons as they were called back then. And it's the same with property. Somebody designs a set of houses and people latch onto it and decide, oh, I would like one of those. And throughout the country it becomes a fashion statement to have the latest style in property. So I'm going to do a few more streets in Liverpool's Georgian Quarter because it really is a beautiful area, and in the next video I'm going to look at the next era, which is Victorian. But at the end of this video I'm going to go through the reign of the 4 Georges and also the reign of William IV. So if you're interested in that, I will do that at the end of the video, just so you know what these kings were all about. Let's have a look at the kings who reigned through and also gave their name to this particular time in our history. So first of all, we have George I, and he was born in Hanover, Germany. He was on the throne from 1714 to 1727, and he didn't actually want to be King of Britain at the time. He wasn't keen on the gig. So people of Britain actually liked him at first, but he spent quite a lot of his time in Hanover, more time there than he did here, and the public basically got fed up with him. They also believed he was a little bit of an idiot, and he gained the nickname of the Turnip King. So next up we have George II, and he was also born in Hanover, Germany, and he was on the throne from 1727 to 1760, and he's described as being courageous and vigorous. He led his army into battle, and he was the last monarch to do so. But he was also apparently a bit of a bore. He liked to talk about his war efforts and his war heroics. He used to describe his uniforms to people, and apparently he also had his underwear numbered for the days of the week. Strange. So next up is George III, and he was actually born in England. And he was on the throne from 1760 to 1820. And he's described as being quite cultured and courageous and well-intentioned. But also, he was mentally ill, and he contributed to Britain losing the 13 North American states in 1783. So the final George in this lineup, George IV, and he was on the throne from 1820 up until 1830, so just 10 years. He was extravagant, and at his coronation banquet, it cost £25,000, just the banquet alone. Families in this country were expected to live on £30 a year at this time. So I don't think he was very well liked. So that brings us to the end of the Georgian period, 1830. But as I said earlier, people add on the reign of William IV, which brings the end of the Georgian period to 1837. And I think that's because houses of the same style, buildings of this particular symmetrical style, were still being built up until the end of the reign of William IV. So William IV is on the throne from 1830 to 1837. He actually served in New York during the American War of Independence, and George Washington actually wanted to have him kidnapped. Anyway, that's the 5 kings that were on the throne between, what did we say, 1714 and 1837, the Georgian era, and a bit of William. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch up soon.